I realized that I actually like SRE because this is more like systems and software engineering and a lot of DevOps. And this is shifted completely different than just full stack web development. Back when I was a developer in full stack, I would work on one or two apps and they would have similar architecture. The front end, a back end, a database, AWS services, authentication, and many more. But the key here is that I was doing a lot of critical thinking back then. Now in SRE, since I'm orchestrating or involving with an entire system, I need to think critically and solve the problem and implement the solution that I needed. And this is very different than just fixing bugs, making implementation changes for business logic, and translating business requirements into functional code. I know there is a lot more in building a web app or full stack, but from my experience there now, it seems like anyone can just spin up AI, right? GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, sometimes in a terminal or in VS Code, these agent modes can kind of orchestrate and do most of the tasks. If you already know what you needed to be done for web development, right? Whether that's front end, back end, connecting to the database, running unit tests, the AI agents is really good at making this happen. On the other hand, for SRE and DevOps, since we're working with the pipelines, right? I think AI is not necessarily good at debugging pipelines just because does not have access to it does have access to the project and it can read through the CIML files and how the stages and how it's triggering different pipelines. But it doesn't really go into the UI and see how it all connects. So it will go in circle and confidently know that it is solving the issue that it faces and it's moving on. But in reality, just getting more hands-on practice and repetition with DevOps and running pipelines and debugging pipelines is more important than throwing the error or the issue to AI because it just is not that good at fixing pipelines so far. The specifics I do in SRE ranges from observability, monitoring, and configuring alarms, alerts, and seeing and going through their health checks and logging standards and seeing how the application for a specific team is running and executing successfully. And what would happen, the difference is thinking what would happen when something unexpected come up. Can that be detected? Can that be remediated? And can the application be resolved in a systematic manner? And in full stack, right, the difference is that we're not really thinking so much about the architecture and system design unless we as the junior developer develop the entire app from scratch or building the architecture or building a brand new app for the first time, which I think for the most of us that's not the case. We're thrown into a code base and we're fixing bugs, implementing features, and learning as much as we can. But it really becomes quite repetitive and it kind of become the same. So another part in SRE is that we would implement resiliency automation scripts. So we would have application team and we'll work on their code and we'll create and deploy and test in lower environment and then we would do a dry run of failover and failback testing. And then once this is done, we move on to production and production contingency. And lastly, we do the actual failover and failback testing again and gather the evidence. So this part is really understanding the AWS services, the architecture, and using GitLab and Terraform and deploying. So a lot of pipelines and DevOps skills, debugging and troubleshooting, and make it run in that application team specific project and environment is really crucial. Thankfully, so far, our smaller team from SRE does not have any live or any on call for any production issues. It may happen in the future, but that is why I like it more now, because it gives me more time to think critically, to solve problems, and I'm feel like I am learning more because I'm engaging and interacting with multiple application teams. I'm learning the AWS services that I haven't seen before. Before, I would just work on the services that are the app uses, right? So that may not be a lot, but now I'm learning more AWS services, and that is solidifying my knowledge. I would know what's important here, what to check, and just getting more repetition in. The only time in SRE that I use AI for help that I think is helpful and it works all the time is rebasing a branch. So I would make changes off of my own branch, but I would branch my new branch off of, say, a lower environment branch or a prod release branch. But the issue is that the app team can continue making updates. So if I'm working on my code and deploying, and when I validate, I find that I'm missing something, I needed to add more of my code changes. But what happens if the app teams, the branch I base from, already have more commits ahead of me? So I'll open the repo in my VS Code, and I would ask the agent to grab their commits. So essentially rebasing it. So it's doing a good job at pulling their commits and seeing if there's any merge conflicts. But I think if I really have to do this myself, I probably could. I will save my changes locally or somewhere, and I would just delete the older branch that I branch off of from the older commits. And I would just re-branch my new branch again from their latest code. So there is a couple ways to do this, but I think for in my scenario here, using this is where I find that if I don't have a lot of time, I don't want to go through my changes, I would just let the agent handle this part. And it has really successfully been working for me, right? Finding the source branch and comparing it and grabbing their commits and put it back to my branch so that I can send my code and prepare the merge request. I think AI can really help anyone code. So the idea here is that SRE and DevOps is more valuable for a developer because managers and directors can just kind of use AI to produce some POC or some code, and but even without really understanding the architecture or the design solutions, because it doesn't really require a high level of critical thinking. Whereas in SRE and DevOps, we get to every day implement the changes and fix them ourselves because AI can help us, right? Because it's going in circles, and I don't think anyone on our team is actually using AI to implement our solutions effectively. And that is why I think SRE and DevOps is more valuable, because we get to repeat and we get to train our critical thinking in different scenarios, and we won't really have to keep delegating the tasks to an agent. Let me know what you think about SRE and DevOps and how it relates to full stack development. If AI is able to help you in SRE or DevOps, or that also you're coding yourself in full stack and that AI isn't helping you, this is really helpful for me.